Okay, what do we got? Seltzer? Root beer? I gotta clean this friggin' thing out. Okay, root beer it is. I used to really like Halloween. When you're a kid, the holiday absolutely slaps. Costumes, candy, parties, cartoon specials, it's a damn fun time. You know, then you grow up, or you live in bumfucking New York like I do. Back in the magical year of 2012, I was running the show on my Windows XP Potato. Amnesia got popular due to a Swedish man screaming at it. I picked it up, have fun, mod it to heck, life's good. Then 2014 rolls around, Five Nights at Freddy's shows up. I'm horribly confused, yet the internet seems to be on fire over it. 2017 rolls in, I'm in college, I've stopped playing horror games mostly due to school. A game comes across my Steam recommended. A little title called C.A.S.E Animatronics. I watched the trailer, I think it looks interesting, download the demo, and then forgot about it for 5 years. Fast forward to 2022, at some point between now and then the game went on sale for like $1. I had a demo downloaded on my current PC, but still had not actually played it yet. I'm working full time and have a YouTube channel with like one good video, so what better time to play this game than now? C.A.S.E Animatronics was originally published to the now defunct Steam Greenlight service in 2015. After being approved, it was released on August 3rd, 2016 onto PC, developed by Russian developers Last Level and Walnut. Yeah, the dev is literally just called Walnut. As far as I can tell, C.A.S.E is Walnut's first game. A sequel that is still in ongoing development was released 2 years later to the day. The game did get some fairly positive reception if Steam is anything to go by. However, because the game features animatronics, comparisons to Five Nights at Freddy's were fast. Seriously, it's right there on the store page with quotes from Green and Red PewDiePie, and if you go to the Steam reviews, scroll down like hell, and do Control F FNAF, you get hundreds of hits. The comparisons are extremely obvious from the get-go, mainly from the use of animatronic robots and the game's camera system, but apart from that, the game still looks very much different from the game it's being compared to, and, well, it has a few things in common. I didn't think it was a fair comparison. However, after playing it and doing some looking into the game itself as well as its story, I can understand why. Allow me to demonstrate. Yeah, this is the first Steam game I've done for the channel, so I'm not quite sure what to do here. Hey! The game opens in a police station in Aurora, Colorado. You take the role of a police officer, affectionately known as main character, waking up at his desk after falling asleep for a little while.
What is it? Strange. No one else should be here. I'll go check.
This acts as the game's tutorial as you're introduced to the two main tools, the flashlight and the tablet. A character makes fun of the tablet only to immediately contradict himself within the next minute.
Yes, the tablet. The department relies too much on this new monitoring system. At this rate, they'll soon give us a joystick and a lightsaber. What a comfortable gadget. In 10 years, these are gonna be everywhere.
I will say now, so far, everything the, and I quote, main character has said right now is weirdly phrased and delivered. Normally I'd take the piss out of it, but since this is an indie game by a small team presumably in Russia, I'm gonna go easy on it. As far as writing goes, I'll be focusing primarily on the actual story of the game within itself. Right-click controls the flashlight, left-click turns the tablet on and off. Pressing tab allows you to open the cameras and view the police station at your discretion, provided you're able to see and have access to the cameras themselves. The tablet itself has a limited battery power, as does the flashlight, so you have to be careful in terms of how often you use both and make sure the tablet stays charged. But this wasn't a constant issue, at least from my experience. The scary music arrives, and the power suddenly goes out.
Hell, what is it?
You're then tasked with navigating the section of the station that you're in to turn on the power switch. In this section you have no robots in camera, just you, your flashlight, and a map of the station on the wall. While you have no active enemy at this time, you are able to go up the hall and see a caricature of me after a few beers. Once you find B7 and flick the breaker, you're forced into the first of many jump scares. You are dead, the animatronics ate you. Try to hide better? To recap what just happened, Nosferatu turned off the lights, I flipped the switch, got killed instantly, and the game told me to get good. I was left bewildered wondering how I was even supposed to proceed, but apparently that was a glitch because that's not supposed to happen. The game loaded normally the second time I went through it. You know, after going through the entire fucking tutorial all over again. We get eaten the second time, sit through 30 seconds of loading despite this game being on my SSD, and wake up at our desk. It's similar to before, up until the phone rings.
Night call. Let's hope nothing serious.
Hello, Bishop. Marvelous night, isn't it? I'm sure you don't remember me. A lot of time has passed since our last meeting. How do you like the new surveillance system? One day, you took everything I had, and now it's time to pay.
The caller appears to have some history with our character, who we now know simply as Bishop, holding a type of vendetta against him for reasons yet to be known. We're once again tasked with returning power, similar to before. One jump scare later, we get the code from the clunker up the hall, plug it in, and power's back on. Bishop makes mention of a second breaker switch, and if we check our camera, we can see that only half the station has power now. If we go back to where the robot was, we can answer the phone on the desk, getting another call from the man from earlier.
Well, starting to remember? How do you like my gift? Like it? Like it? It loves to play.
This is the first of 3 robots we have to deal with, this one being the wolf. The most basic enemy in the game, it wanders around the area looking for the player, giving chase if he sees you. He's not too much of a nuisance to deal with as he's the only active robot right now, and it's here where we get properly introduced to the game's hiding mechanics. Scattered around the police station are desks, cabinets, and lockers that you can hide in or under. Understanding how these work is very crucial to survival, but that's for later. Upon being met with the now active Wolfbot, you can see a door to the locker room suddenly open. Hide inside the locker next to the police chief's dirty socks and watch the freak wander by. We're now properly given our second task, powering the second half of the station. I will be honest, I had to look up a walkthrough for this one. The game doesn't leave much information on how to proceed apart from hints that occasionally appear at the top of the screen, but it's not impossibly cryptic. I do have my criticisms about it though, which I will discuss later. Viewing the tablet, the game will mark a specific room you need to go to with the green icon. There's no indicator on the map for where you are, so it's up to you to make an educated guess as to where you are in the station based on what you see in the cameras and your own surroundings. In the second half of the building, we can find another animatronic, this one themed after a cat, based on the phrase meow meow mother carved into its chest. There's also this giant crate here with God knows what inside. I thought this contained another animatronic, but I turned out to be wrong. When I got to the end of the game, the box was still intact and jumping. I looked online, and there was a 4th animatronic in the form of a bear at one point, and it could be seen in an early version of the game through a trailer on Steam Greenlight, but that was ultimately scrapped. What needs to be done is that we have to find a keycard to this specific door so we can turn on the power to the other side of the building. Now me, in my infinite wisdom, started wandering around the entire station, running from the robot like I'm in a Scooby-Doo chase looking for this keycard. What I failed to notice was the showers themselves. At first, this room seems like it's just there to fill out the station, but in reality, this is where you find that keycard. It's also the only place you find that keycard. I explored the majority of the station trying to find it, but only realized it's in the showers upon checking a walkthrough. Look around on the floor, find the card, get insta-killed looking at the tablet with no noise to tell you you're in danger. Flick the power on, check the tablet to find our next adversary, the cat robot. It's functionally identical to the wolf robot, with the only added exception that it can climb through vents. I know what you're thinking, and I'm not gonna say it. The tablet will start to die and your next goal is to get the battery charged. Without the camera system to help you as much, all you can really do now is to try to find where Ben's room is to get the power to the tablet. Once the cat robot is out and about, you have to go to a safe that was in the evidence room to get a lockpick. Bolt into a cabinet and get a glimpse of the cat robot doing a funny dance underneath one of the vents. After finding the office, you get a Bethesda-level lockpicking minigame followed by stopping a computer virus on the computer inside to turn on the charger. It's an extremely simple matching game and can be finished quickly. Charge the tablet, swipe another keycard from the file cabinets inside, go back to where the second power switch is, and open the attached office with said keycard. You'll get some dialogue from Bishop covering his first call as a police officer.
What do you want me to remember? You said that I took everything from you. My first call. I remember it. A complete failure, even for a rookie like me who had just graduated from the academy. Scott DJ. His wife and child were killed, and Scott ended up in intensive care. Why did he refuse to speak with me? Is it because I didn't catch the killer?
To further build on what he's talking about here, the caller, now known as Scott DJ, previously mentioned clues from the past being scattered around the station.
In this building, there are some echoes of the past. Try to collect them so we can see who you really are.
Throughout the station are these notes that you can collect which serve as background lore, detailing the origin of the animatronics as well as Scott himself. One note describes an undated news article detailing an incident in which a gunman forced his way into a home around 1 a.m., with police being called by neighbors. A struggle ensued, resulting in 3 casualties. 2 of them, a woman and child respectively, who died at the scene, and the third, Scott himself, who would survive but not without injury. Bishop, the cop called to the scene, tried to get answers from Scott regarding the incident while he was at the hospital, but was unsuccessful as Scott refused to speak to him and he was forcibly removed from his ward. This is explained across notes 1, 2, and 3. Notes 0, 4, and 5 detail the animatronics themselves, explaining they were fitted with abilities that allow them to be used as part of a security system, making use of police databases and facial recognition, and were originally created by Scott himself. Note 0 specifically mentions that the animatronic's operating system freezes after several hours of use. This piece of information becomes relevant later. It's mentioned that they intended to attack people, with at least one person being killed and others sent to the hospital. It's also mentioned that a pizza place made use of these, with the owner of one such restaurant almost being killed because of them. Additionally, 5 children went missing, with a security guard suspected to have committed the crime despite the abilities of the animatronics themselves. To anyone even slightly familiar with FNAF's timeline of events, one might find that last line about the kids vanishing familiar, but then again I had to do a fair amount of research on that one to be sure. The remaining notes date from June of 1977 to 1987, detailing how Scott got the idea to give the animatronics the ability to move, how they were constructed, forming a relationship with his now late wife Emma, and eventually proposing to her. Scott blames Bishop for the death of his wife and child, and the use of the animatronics in the police station are his means of conducting revenge against him. Coming back to the game, one will hear the cat crawling through the vents, prompting you to hide under the desk in the same room. Bishop will yell at the cat to leave.
Get out of here already!
Which only left me with the belief that if this were a horror movie, Bishop would be dead before the opening credits finished rolling. Pick up the phone for another call from Scott, where you're now given the task of surviving for a set amount of time while the ventilation system is turned off. What this means is that the longer you stay in a room, the worse your vision is going to get, making it difficult to navigate. The idea here is the game forces you to move around from room to room, rather than sit in one spot. It is possible to turn the ventilation system back on, though I never did so in my first run. You'll know when you can get the key when Bishop says this line for a second time.
I must hold on until 3 a.m. I need that key!
Oh boy, 3 a.m.
Now, you can play the cat and mouse game as Scott suggests, or you can be a massive bitch like me and hide in the lockers to run up the clock. You know, provided one of the robots doesn't decide to peek inside. That's one thing I want to mention. The hiding spots are not foolproof. On occasion, the animatronics will check the inside of certain hiding spots if you sit inside them for too long. Additionally, if you run to a hiding spot while being chased and you're still in direct sight of a robot, they will rip it open and kill you. However, my theory is that this can be cheesed if you immediately leave a hiding spot and then go right back in. Survive long enough to get another keycard to open the interrogation room and pick up the phone when it rings.
It seems you have met another one of my creations. Your luck surprises me. Okay, that's it. No more playing around. Toys went on a hunt. Turn around. Surprise!
The third and final robot we're introduced to is the owl. It functions very differently compared to the 2 other robots in that it only moves when you actively turn away from it. This robot won't outright chase you, but obviously you shouldn't walk too close to it. To deal with this robot, what you need to do is back away and out of sight until it leaves your vision. Get enough distance, and then re-enter the room it's inside. This robot is fairly infamous for being unfair if the Steam reviews are anything to go by, as it doesn't walk around like any other animatronic, it only teleports, meaning there's a very realistic chance it could blink to a room you just happen to be in and kill you instantly. You need to get to the locked cell in the second half of the building, but the other robots are constantly patrolling that area. Get the battery from the room the owl was originally standing in, and then make your way to the radio in the hallway. Turning on the radio will draw their attention. Quickly run to this hiding spot once they're distracted, get the hell out of there, and use the lockpick on the cell door. You'll enter a room full of files and a computer showing the back of an animatronic with a keycard on it. You'll then get one last phone call from Scott, who seems to be rambling a bit more than before.
The game dragged on, Bishop, and you played by the rules. I can't let you get away with the files. You know, this reminds me of Emma. I miss her. I made that bastard scream and cry, but it didn't make me calm. And then I realized that I must punish you for what you've done. It's a pity that my toys aren't good enough. Though, we might be able to increase the power a bit. Goodbye, Bishop. It was fun playing with you.
It's possible this could be related to translation issues, but I'm honestly not certain. The cat will drop out of the vents, chase you briefly, and then stop. This is where that key piece of information about the animatronics freezing comes in. In this phase of the game, the animatronics will periodically pause, allowing you to grab the keycard off the back of one of them. Find the first keycard, find out it doesn't work, do it again, and then make it to the front door. One more cutscene will play with Bishop entering his cruiser and then getting kidnapped by Scott.
Hello, Bishop.
The game boots you back to the main menu, and that's it. Game over, you win. The story for C.A.S.E is very simple, and the game can be finished pretty much in an afternoon. Much like the game is compared to, it's not enormous, and the deeper lore is there if you dig a little more into it. The game controls are alright, and there's nothing weird about the control scheme. It's fairly easy to grasp. Nothing really to talk about at this moment. It's perfectly fine. Let's move on to looks and sound. Visually, the game is nothing special. If anything, it's a run-of-the-mill Unity game with realistic visuals. It's not too stylized and doesn't look bad. The robots seem to share the same basic design, with the wolf and cat sharing the same body shape. The owl seems to be the outlier to this, having a more visually distinct appearance in contrast to the previously mentioned wolf and cat. There isn't much to speak for most things in this game. It's fine for an indie game made in Unity. It looks serviceable, and honestly, I like this type of setting that isn't going out of its way to be a typical horror setup. If you look at horror games that came throughout the 2010s, like Slender, Amnesia, and Outlast, which have Dark Forest, 18th Century Castle, and Psych Ward as their settings in that order, all of them could be an easy target for a horror story. Here, it's just a police station. Nothing out of the ordinary apart from the animatronics hunting you. If you really look around, it's very standard apart from like one or two things. Paperwork, computers, donuts, offices, wanted posters of criminals. It's not like the walls are being caked in blood or flesh or anything like that. As far as Bishop was concerned, it was a typical night at the station right up until he got that phone call. I honestly think it helps the atmosphere of the game a little bit. It's not going out of its way to be scary most of the time, leaving the player to essentially scare themselves by building paranoia through the unassuming environment and sounds. Speaking of sound, I personally think the ambient noise is alright. Footsteps, deep booming noise while wandering around, turn off the lights, close the doors and blinds, and it's an okay experience. I haven't got much to complain about apart from volume. When I started up the game, the main menu theme was unreasonably loud, and I thought it was my own settings, but based on the experiences of others, that doesn't seem to be the case. Each robot makes this loud clanking noise as they walk around, which does a pretty good job at indicating that you need to watch your back and where you go. If you can't pinpoint where the clanking is coming from, and you start hearing it getting louder and faster, you better hope you can get into a hiding spot in time. The death noises can be a bit loud, especially if you're trying to stay absorbed in the game's setting. The ability to suspend disbelief and get absorbed in the game's world is important here, and after hearing the same speaker blasting Scream a lot, it can really take you out of it. After a certain point, I started paying close attention to this particular death noise. And after listening to it a few more times after playing the game, it started sounding a lot like the noise made in that meme of the sad emoji turning to dust. You know, this one. The voice acting is odd, but I don't want to be that hard on it on account of it being from Russia and from an indie team. I think whoever was voicing Scott did a much better job compared to the voice actor for Bishop. Scott is written as if he's supposed to come off as unhinged, and I think the voice actor did an okay job at presenting that with the lines he was given.
How do you like my gift? Like it? Like it? A lot of time has passed since our last meeting. One day, You took everything I had, and now it's time to pay. Toys went on a hunt. Turn around. Surprise!
As for Bishop, well...
The battery drains out very quickly. Hell, what is it? It's weird that the charger is off. Let's see what's on a computer screen. What do you want me to remember? You said that I took everything from you. Sick bastard! A giant cat! What else can you think of? My first call. I remember it. A complete failure.
The lines from later in the game seem to come off better than the lines from the very beginning of the game. It's very weird. I feel like the VA had a little better understanding at that time than he did in the very beginning. I feel like they probably could have done a couple more takes with these lines because the deliveries just feel very, very jarring and off. Not to say that this is bad or anything like that, it gives it a cheesy charm that reminds me of the Resident Evil 1 cutscenes.
Stop it! Don't open that door!
But Chris is...
What is it?
All in all, the audio is okay. Apart from some weirdness, it's serviceable and not god-awful, and really, that's all it needs to be. In a horror game, the only noise you really gotta focus on is the ambient tracks and the sounds played when the player is in danger to help the experience, and C.A.S.E does decently enough in that regard, but enough about C.A.S.E itself for now. Let's start comparing things. I decided to do something similar to the Men in Black video, but this time played two games from the similar time period completely blind. The original Five Nights at Freddy's and Outlast. I will also briefly bring up Resident Evil 1 again, though not much. I'll be explaining these games primarily from a gameplay stance, as well as to illustrate how the horror settings and mechanics in each game function in comparison to C.A.S.E. I'll start with a question. What is a traditional horror game? When I think of a traditional horror game, I think of a game that's like this. You have your protagonist or multiple protagonists, you have one or more monsters, and your options to deal with them. You have run and hide, and run or fight. An example of the latter is Resident Evil 1. I already discussed this game in the Men in Black video, so I'll make this brief. You have zombies and other creatures around the mansion and the ability to fight back against them through means of melee weapons and firearms, but you also have the option of getting away from them to protect yourself instead. This is primarily to make the player consider their limited resources when it comes to combat, healing, and saving the game. This type of game is typically called survival horror, and is a much better example of such, unlike a certain game about aliens and secret government agencies.
You were supposed to neuralize him! How could you mess this up?
I did!
Idiot!
I swear
I
to fucking God.
Get out!
Let's move over to Outlast now. From the very beginning, Outlast tells you that this is not a game where you can fight back, outright telling you to run away, hide, or die trying to do both. Setting-wise, you're in Mount Massive Mental Asylum, a typical setting for just about any piece of horror fiction. Movement is fairly standard and everything is from a first-person perspective. Most of your time spent in Outlast is exploring the asylum, learning about the experiments that took place here and recording the world as you go. The only tool you have on hand to help you is the camcorder and the night vision filter. The attached light is fed by batteries, which are scattered around the world. The closest comparison to this that I can personally think of is the lamp oil from Amnesia: The Dark Descent, but instead of being able to gradually add to your charge, you simply reload the camera as if it were the magazine of a gun, swapping to a new battery upon doing so while discarding the old one. When encountering an enemy, the music will change and they'll immediately give chase. If they hit you, you'll be hurt, but you will survive provided you manage to get some distance and successfully hide from them. You also have the ability to slow down your foes by closing doors on them. This is a feature I also recall being present in Amnesia. A small thing I like to have is it buys you time and gives you a chance to hide. This is something I do want to criticize C.A.S.E for, as while the animatronics can be outrun, they can't be slowed down no matter how many doors you close on them. Given the space of the police station is already kind of limited, I imagine this was to tip the balance in the favor of the animatronics. The puzzles in Outlast didn't feel that cryptic at all. I didn't feel the need to rely on a walkthrough to figure out what I needed to do next. The game is straightforward with you on what you need to do, but it doesn't explicitly hold your hand on proceeding, nor does it hide information from you to force you to figure things out for yourself. You progress naturally as you move through the asylum, connecting the dots on what needs to be done, gradually moving further towards your goal only to be set back by something or someone, pushing you into the next steps to escape. Contrast with C.A.S.E where it seems to be all over the spectrum from giving no context to leaving small hints to outright telling me what to do. So we have Outlast as our traditional horror game, and Resident Evil as our survival horror game. FNAF is not something I would consider to fit either category. I picked the original game as I wanted to experience it in its purest form. If you're unfamiliar with Five Nights and its mechanics, essentially you're locked in a room with door switches and a camera system. Your job is to not only keep an eye on them, but to make sure the animatronics don't reach you at your desk, running out the clock until 6 AM comes and not running out of power before then. What FNAF does differently to a typical horror game is that you're not given any options to directly defend yourself by fighting back or escaping your situation. You can only delay the inevitable until time runs out. You can't leave the room because the animatronics will just grab you immediately. You can't fight back because you have no means of doing so in your setting to begin with. The camera system lets you view various angles in the pizzeria to keep track of your adversaries in the form of rabbit, bird, bear, and fox. The first three wander around the building at random points and gradually get more aggressive in their movement as the game goes on. Foxy operates in a red light, green light fashion where if you don't keep an eye on him, he'll barrel down the hallway and get to you if you're not quick to close the door and stop him. Neglect to monitor a doorway by closing doors and checking lights to see if one is getting too close and you're going home in a box. You can't slow them down, nor hide from them directly. You can only shut the door on them when they reach their goal. On top of all this, you have the battery power system. Everything you do uses power. Closing the doors, turning on the lights, and using the camera. You can't use everything all at once, because that will erase any power you have and give you a game over if you're not conservative enough. So you have to find the right balance of camera and door usage to run out the clock and win the game. Visually speaking, Five Nights is very obviously stylized, having a slightly cartoonish vibe to it with its roots in 80s and 90s pizza arcades like Chuck E. Cheese and Showbiz Pizza. FNAF also takes the atypical horror setting approach, placing you in a pizza restaurant, but it tries to lean more into the creep factor by locking you in a security room you can't leave, with your only glimpses of the outside being this black and white camera system. With all of that in mind, look at C.A.S.E now. With how each game functions, the comparisons make sense, but I would argue it's what the result of Outlast and FNAF having a baby would be like from a gameplay perspective. You have an open area to explore with roaming enemies, your only tools are lights and a camera system that you can use to keep track of them, all while searching for items to progress the game. Story-wise, it does take some more inspiration from FNAF, at least when talking about Scott. His backstory feels like it's just FNAF copied and changed a little bit. In terms of graphical style, the final product is very much different, but watching the Steam Greenlight trailer again, it looks like the earlier versions of the game leaned more into that. The minimap for the security system looks lifted straight from FNAF in terms of placement and style. Oh, and that bear robot I mentioned earlier? The dev team got a DMCA from Coffin's lawyer about it. I couldn't make this up if I wanted to. Now, if we're talking scares and horror, the quality of them is entirely down to whoever's playing and what they feel works, so this one's my personal opinion. What someone finds scary is subjective. Take this with a grain of salt. I personally feel that both games do things well when it comes to their horror, but both suffer from the same problem. To start with the good in FNAF, I already mentioned FNAF locks the player in the room with no way to leave, and from the time I spent with it, I felt that Five Nights at Freddy's gets its horror from three things: paranoia, urgency, and surprise. Firstly, the vast majority of the horror in this game comes from the player trying their damnedest to keep track of everyone and prevent anyone from slipping into the room by accident. If the player is peeking around the cameras and having trouble finding a certain animatronic, or notices they're in a room that's alarmingly close, they can get worried they might get in at any moment. Or, better yet, find out they're standing right next to the door. Secondly, to add on to this, how Foxy operates as a whole. I stated that if you neglect to keep an eye on him, he'll leave his area and sprint to your room. This will leave you with a tiny window to get the camera down and shut the door. The more Foxy creeps out of his area, the more it can make the player think they're not checking often enough, diverting their attention away from everyone else and potentially wasting power as well. This brings me to my next point: urgency. As with any game, the further you go, the more difficult it gets. Freddy and his crew will gradually get more and more aggressive as each day passes and you get further into each night. This will in turn make players move more frantically, rapidly checking cameras and doors to make sure they got eyes everywhere, not to mention periodic glances at power supply and time until 6 AM. Which brings me to my final point: surprise. This game, and franchise as a whole, loves its jump scares, even with the most recent release. For someone playing this for the first time, the jump scares do a decent job the first few times. However, the jump scares, being what they are, devolve into a basic startle and lose their novelty fast. I will say that as someone who's never played this game proper prior to planning for this video, the game did do a good job of getting me early on. You see me frantically clicking on this door? That's me not realizing I messed up and thinking the game glitched. I was jumping from camera to camera trying to figure out where Bonnie was because I genuinely had no clue. Found him. Looking at C.A.S.E, to me, it relies on two things: sound and atmosphere. There is some element of surprise in a few of the jump scares in this game, but much like FNAF, they wear off fast and I don't think it's worth rediscussing. I'll start with sound. If there's one thing C.A.S.E has going for it in my opinion, it's the audio. While there is some general horror music throughout, the clanking of the robots can be a bit unnerving if you get decently absorbed into this game. For a good while, you can hear pretty much nothing other than the ambient music the game uses, but as soon as the clanking comes in, it can send you into being alert almost instantly. However, there are some issues with the game's audio, namely in terms of volume. This game is loud. It's loud on the main menu screen, and more importantly, the noise made during the jump scare deaths can be a bit loud too. The editor, once again, doesn't sell it too well, but play the game for yourself if you want an excuse to explode your speakers. The sound of the robots getting louder as they get closer and I was trying to hide, I will admit, did manage to do a decent job of scaring me a little bit. Usually when I play a horror game like this, I try to do so in as dark a room as possible with decent headphones on. I'd argue this is the one thing C.A.S.E has over FNAF, as from what I recall in FNAF, the audio felt more like general sound rather than the audio you had to pinpoint to fully tell where everything is. Granted, in the room where the camera feed is broken, you have to really listen to know for sure if anyone is in there, but that's the fullest extent from what I can tell. The vast majority of information in FNAF 1 is visual. I don't count the information from the guy on the phone as for the first few nights, it feels more like exposition than anything. As far as atmosphere goes, C.A.S.E keeps the vast majority of its areas as normal as possible and as previously stated, not going out of its way to be messed up or covered in gore, almost taking a horror movie type approach, where the main bad guy is only speaking to you via phones like a crappy version of Saw.
This puzzle is very simple. Just plug in the Galaxy Note 7.
A lot of the areas are sparingly lit, requiring you to either find the light switches associated with those areas or rely on your flashlight to help you be able to see. During the quiet moments where there are no robots around, I think is where the game is at its best, especially when you get absorbed into the setting. Just the player exploring the area as they try to navigate around and reach their next goal, only for the clanking to be heard in the distance, making you instinctively check your cameras to try to find out how close the robots really are. At the same time, there are some things that just absolutely shatter immersion. I already brought up the voice acting is a bit weak, not to mention some of the things said by Bishop during the game feel kinda brain dead, such as when he's under the desk shouting at the cat robot. Horror movie 101, don't yell at the thing trying to kill you. As for the bad, they both suffer from one thing, and that's called repetition. FNAF doesn't really change up the gameplay apart from the difficulty. All the animatronics are present in earlier nights, but Freddy doesn't start getting opportunities to move until at least the third night, and even then, he functions similarly to everyone else, having random opportunities to move as the night goes on. Tech Rules has a video that explains the game's AI far more in depth than I'm willing to go right now, so if you want to take a look at that, click on the card in the corner. The jump scares, as mentioned, wear off quickly. They're startling the first few times, but after a certain point you're kinda just expecting them to happen. Same thing happens in C.A.S.E. While more animatronics get thrown into the mix, you're still doing the exact same thing each time, playing this convoluted game of hide and seek to open a door or answer the phone. There were a few moments where I started hearing robots running towards me, and knowing I was in an area that had little no chance to escape from, I just waited for the thing to kill me right there. If you've seen one jump scare, you've seen all of them. Once you know they're gonna happen, they lose their touch. I've had just about enough of discussing horror, so how about something a little more lighthearted? This segment is going to touch on some of the weirdness I experienced while playing this game. One thing I will note is that the game does have some oddness that can be a bit amusing within itself, but it doesn't exactly detract from the game. There's donuts you're allowed to eat scattered about. Not sure why, but it's a fun detail. It ultimately has zero impact on anything, but I love small things like that in a game. On a less amusing note, during the early game there's this jump scare featuring a ghostly looking woman. Barring the fact that I'm genuinely mad this actually managed to get a scare out of me the first time, what baffles me is that it doesn't fit the aesthetic of the game in any capacity. If you look at literally everywhere else in this game, just about everything is fully grounded in reality. You know, as grounded in reality as killer animatronic robots can get. But I'm still playing a game about robots that eat people. Why am I being shown the ShopRite brand version of the girl from The Ring? The robots have a tendency to teleport at random points when watching them on camera. This makes it difficult to keep track of them going from room to room, because for all you know, the robot might have just teleported into an area adjacent to you, leaving you not a lot of time to react. Speaking of, the player does not have any third-person model, so if you happen to be in the same room as an animatronic and watch yourself die in the camera, it looks like the robot is going into a corner specifically to scream. Personally, it's more funny than it is immersion breaking. The game features subtitles to go along with the game's voice acting. Some of these lines don't match up with what is being said and can lead to some strange statements. The most glaring example is during the last phone call, where Emma is known to be Scott's wife, but for some reason she's referred to as his cat. I want to say this sounds silly, but I feel like anyone who loves their cat dearly would flip shit if someone hurt them. Probably not to the level of locking a cop in their station with killer robots, but they would flip shit. The game is largely glitch-free. I found nothing game-breaking overall, and the only things that are really odd are cosmetic, if anything. Let's wrap this up. Yeah, I can't dance around this anymore. I wanted to go into this thinking there's no reason for people to consider this a FNAF clone or ripoff, but with my own experiences and what I found just researching, it's pretty goddamn blatant. To my understanding, Cawthon is usually fairly laid back when it comes to fan games or stuff inspired by his work. People still make fan games even to this day, and some with far better quality than they have any right to be. However, when you make something that leans a bit too much into the inspiration end of things for a profit and it gets enough attention to warrant a DMCA, that's kind of an issue. At the end of the day, I feel C.A.S.E does have some potential to stand on its own. After all, it did seem to do well enough from the developer's perspective to warrant a sequel 2 years later. The comparisons, I feel, are apt, and while the games are primarily different from a gameplay perspective, C.A.S.E borrows a bit too much from one of its main inspirations for its own good. It's also extremely overpriced for its length, with the normal price being $10 American, while the game itself can be finished pretty much within a couple of hours. I think that's partly why its sequel is at a lower price point. In a gun-to-my-head pick-one situation, I'd go with FNAF. Both games are on my backlog and I'm happy to have played them finally, but I'd rather go back to Five Nights at Freddy's before coming back here. This game I wouldn't call a bad experience, but it's not the greatest. It has a few problems. The AI can be unfair at times, such as the robots teleporting around and the potential to get instantly killed at random points. The game is cryptic in some spots and sometimes holds your hand, while there are some nods as to where you need to be or what to do, which I won't complain about. I like having some idea of what to do versus no idea what to do. Sometimes the game will straight up tell you what to do with the hints. The game will also set you back at random points, such as randomly killing off the battery of the tablet or the flashlight as previously mentioned. Even if you barely use the tablet and are at 90%, at certain points the game will force the battery to go near death. Additionally, there's no battery indicator for the flashlight itself. Speaking of the flashlight though, the only purpose it seems to serve is to give you the ability to see in the dark. Abuse the flashlight and it will die. Wait for some time, it comes back. This game is extremely dark, which can make it difficult to see if you didn't turn on any of the lights beforehand, and if that flashlight dies, you're essentially crippled and have to rely on the memory of the room layout. It doesn't give you away or make it easier for the AI to spot you. It doesn't matter if you shine the flashlight in the robot's face or stand completely still in the corner of a dark room. If you even begin to enter the line of sight of any of the roaming robots, you're already dead. I know this because I chilled out in an office with the lights off and one of them opened the door while I was in there and went for the kill. This can be problematic if you have muscle memory from playing other horror games where the concept of hiding around the environment alongside dedicated hiding spots are present. Coming back to Outlast, during one of the early segments I was being chased by one of the variants. I ran into a room and hid behind a shelf rather than go into a dedicated hiding spot. The variant looked around the room a little bit before wandering off. If this were C.A.S.E, the robot would have homed into where I was standing and killed me. To close this off, I don't think C.A.S.E was that bad of a game, but it has a few things that hold it back from being anywhere close to good. Maybe the devs did a better job on C.A.S.E 2, however I have yet to play that as of this recording. Maybe next year. Now, how would I rate this game compared to what I've played up until now? Honestly, hard to say. Looking at what I've reviewed so far, worse than Bugdom, but better than Men in Black. Also because while this game wasn't amazing, it didn't make me want to stand between two trains about to collide head on. It's one of those finish and uninstall it games to me. Not a game to return to, and honestly, I'll probably forget about it as soon as I upload this video. I didn't miss anything not playing it, and now that I think about it, I didn't gain anything from playing it either. It's not a game I would recommend. There's far better and frankly far more entertaining games out there compared to this. Thank you for watching. Leave your thoughts down in the comments below. If this is your first time visiting the channel, consider checking out my previous videos and subscribe for more. Follow me on Instagram at MrMax98 for other work unrelated to videos. I'm Mr. Max. Have a happy Halloween. I'll see you next time.
Freddy, you're supposed to be on lockdown.
It looks like someone's mad. Go cry about it, bitch.